Good evening. Welcome to the February 17th, 2015 Planning and Zoning meeting. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, then a moment of silence.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic from which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could have roll call from left to right.
Anthony Sutton.
Mike Dolan.
Jean Servine.
Edward Mead.
Tom Nickel.
Tom Panzella.
Jim Quish.
And I am Ben Gettinger. Also present are David Sulkis, City Planner, and Phyllis Leggett, Board Clerk. The first item on the agenda is 460 Bick Drive, Zone OD, petition of Garden Homes Management Corporation for special permit and site plan review approval to construct a 257-unit residential development under CGS Section 830G on map 41, block 301, parcel 29, of which Garden Homes Residential LP is the owner. Hello.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Once again, for the record, Thomas Lynch. I'm here tonight representing Garden Homes Management, the applicant in this matter. And at the February 3rd meeting, it was my understanding that the public hearing was to be kept open. Mr. Kochi, the owner of the property at 500 Bick Drive, had appeared that night and had indicated that he wanted to have the opportunity to consult with his own experts to review these plans and submit a report in opposition. So we yield the floor at this time, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Kochi and whoever experts he may have brought with him tonight. I would then like to reserve, on behalf of the applicant, the opportunity to have our own experts who are with me here tonight, Mr. Versteeg and Mr. Hennessy, respond to any comments that may be made so that we can rebut that. And again, I'd ask for the opportunity to have time reserved for that.
And just procedurally how it's going to work is Mr. Kochi's report's going to go first. Anyone from the public that would like to comment on the report could comment. Then the applicant will have a chance for rebuttal. Anyone in opposition could rebut the rebuttal, but you're limited to just what was brought out in rebuttal, and then the applicants will have the final say, as is normal procedure.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Kochi. My address is 1 Waterview Drive in Shelton, Connecticut. And we received a request at the last meeting for 2 reports, one life safety, which we have prepared and submitted. One was for a traffic study. And we have approached about 12 different traffic consultants, including our own. No one was available this evening, so I do not have a traffic report to present. My suggestion is, if this procedure might work, is that the town hire its own traffic consultant, and 500 Bick Drive and Northeast Electronics would be willing to reimburse the town for the cost of that study. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ray Walker, who is a fire marshal for 30 years and has presented the life safety report concerning 460 Bick Drive.
Before you start, I could speak on that, and Mr. Sulkis, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we don't close the record today, then the application is automatically granted, correct?
Need to close the record
So
tonight.
if you're in opposition, you do not want to keep this open for a traffic report. You want it closed and then have a vote on it.
Okay, all right.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Ray Walker, 45 Country Club Road in Bolton, Connecticut. I was approached by Mr. Kochi about a week ago to take a look at the project and offer him some thoughts and observations on fire life safety issues, which is what I've done. And you have the report, and I'll just go through some of the highlights and some of the important parts of that. But certainly want you to understand there's no criticism or issues or concerns with the Milford Fire Department. It's a Class 1 fire department. There's none of these comments should be viewed as negative or being critical of them. Certainly none should be viewed as being critical of the role of automatic sprinkler protection. I guess the best proof I can give of that is that I elected to have a home that is protected by automatic sprinklers for the benefit of life safety of my family. I think that goes without saying that I'm an advocate and a strong believer in automatic sprinkler protection. And certainly there's not even a suggestion that incremental parts of this project, when it was put together, would violate any provisions of any fire, life safety code, building codes. That not being, I saw no sign that was the intent of anyone or would be the outcome. The local officials would take care of that and it would be compliant. But having said that, I thought when I looked at the plans, it was really very important to look at the overall picture and all those various elements, which in and of themselves, one at a time, might work on a particular project. But when they all came together at this site, they did raise some concerns for fire and life safety. Starting out with the site itself, currently, as you know, there's 2 vacant dwellings on the parcel. It could house a dwelling. It's surrounded by some industrial commercial buildings, some office buildings, and a number of single-family dwellings. In terms of access, in some sites a single access would work, and some people would say, well, a single access in 2 public roads, you know, on 2 sides of this project certainly provides a considerable amount of access. But it is important to note that the one access to the site is directional, located in one corner of the site. Certainly offers some opportunity for restricted movements of responding fire apparatus, especially when they interact with the occupants coming and going, conducting their business and their activities on the site, or specifically leaving the site, having become aware there's a fire or an emergency, and they not want to be, in their view, stuck or trapped on the property for some amount of time. And the 2 side roads, the 2 main public roads that abut the parcel, because of distance and topography, don't really offer an ample and ready opportunity for the local fire department to park, stage, and then operate off of that apparatus. There are elevation changes, there are grade changes. The ready and efficient deployment of those firefighters from that apparatus is just not going to, in my opinion, going to occur. It's going to be an issue, and it's going to delay the response into the site. And again, that delay compounded by the fact that there's just a single point of access. And first arriving apparatus on the first alarm arrives, but subsequent apparatus, in my opinion, would have a very difficult time. And as I say that and go through the rest of the report, I want you to understand that when I looked at this, I looked at it from my 4 decades of municipal fire protection work, fire suppression, fire prevention, fire marshaling for the biggest chunk of that time, and as a trainer, instructor, and a dispatcher, and dispatcher supervisor. Those are sort of the lens that I looked at as I went through and looked at this project. And that's the basis of my observations and sharing them with you, as I did with Mr. Kochi earlier. And so I just want to have you keep that in mind as we look at these questions. So we do have the site itself, we do have the site access question, and the roads around it. In an adjoining town nearby in Fairfield recently, site access and a single point of access was part of an issue of concern of the local fire service and led to the rejection of the project. And from a fire protection perspective, the codes are clearly going to require automatic sprinklers, and automatic sprinklers are becoming more and more prevalent in all occupancies, particularly in residential occupancies. But there are concerns and questions that absent total and complete automatic sprinkler protection, some of the standards allow for deletion or exemption or exception of sprinklers from some small rooms and small spaces, from concealed spaces, possibly from concealed spaces of lightweight construction and combustible construction. It's those types of exceptions, and a fire in a wall, a fire in a void, a fire in a concealed space will gain significant headway. With the exception of NFPA 13, the sprinkler standard, which has long been looked at and originally developed here in Connecticut for property protection, the residential standards, 13D, which covers my home, a single-family home, and 13R for multiple family buildings, there are some significant exceptions and exemptions for unsprinkled spaces. And again, those are areas where a fire could gain headway and could begin to move forward. And as part of the fire protection, there is the question of the construction methodology. lightweight construction, truss construction, may negate the ability of the fire department to go onto the roof to ventilate or to open up a roof to direct and control with a systematic plan to ventilate the building to relieve the interior conditions. It may be a question that they simply can't get up there. If the roof is not suitable, its integrity under fire conditions would be in question, and they may not be able to do that. And once a fire gains headway in one of these spaces, it could spread very rapidly. Related to the sprinklers is the question of the water supply, and there appear to be 2 water mains on the adjoining streets, but I didn't see any data related to actual demand, what's available, what would be demand for this project. At a fire at this project, if 1 or 2 sprinkler heads contain the project, that's great. But a fire that gained headway could require a water flow of, in the range, 1 or more thousands of gallons of water per minute over a prolonged period of time. And there'd certainly need to be a question asked about, is the public water supply capable of handling that? Could it maintain a standard acceptable residual pressure, often thought to be to avoid public damage to the public water system, a residual pressure of 20 psi in the system? Would that be available? The plan showed a 2-inch and a 4-inch copper lines into the building, 2-inch probably being domestic water, 4 might be for some type of residential sprinkler system. But there were no plans showing other distribution of water for standpipes, for any hydrants that might be needed on the property or placed farther to the back, particularly to offset the problem of once apparatus lays a supply line of hose from the street or from a hydrant on a public road, there's pretty much no crossing over that hose after that by fire apparatus or any other vehicles for fear of, 1, damaging the hose and shutting off and breaking the water supply to firefighters operating in and around the building, and then causing further delay or injury when the charged hose line is broken. So there's a question of adequate water supply available while there are water mains. The question would be, is it adequate and would it be able to sustain a long duration attack? There is an adjoining parcel with a 250,000 gallon supplemental tank and fire pump. So that may be an indication that there is a need to have some kind of supplemental water supply or pressure. And a recent fire in New Jersey not only went through the public water supply, but the fire department there drafted out of the Hudson River. And as part of this presentation tonight, when I conclude these brief comments, we're going to give you a brief slideshow on that particular fire, just to show how it operates and what some of the issues were and what some of the concerns were. Also notice there was a parking garage, and while it had ample openings for resident vehicles, motorized fire apparatus would not be able to access or enter that lower space because of lower ceiling heights. Also, there'd be a question of water supply. It looks like that's a case where firefighters would have to haul in the hose lines by hand through those doors. Certainly from my perspective, again, looking at it in my lenses, which is that of a local fire code official, where is the venting of the smoke and heat going to be handled? Firefighter handheld or wheeled-in fans are slow, laborious, and fall secondary to the attack on the fire. It's going to be a motor vehicle fire, 1 or 2 vehicles, might be expected. Even a single vehicle burning and getting some headway before controlled by the automatic sprinklers, if they were to be present in the parking garage, is still going to generate some high levels of heat, some high levels of toxic gases, some fumes, smoke, and those issues. So there's certainly the question of fire protection in a parking garage below the residence building above. On the site is the Iroquois gas pipeline. There are a couple of references on the plans to safe practices and supervision by Iroquois. In note 6, I believe it was on the plan. I did speak to the Iroquois gas people, and their comment to me was they would need to see a complete set of plans, ample time to review them and make comments concerning any work that would occur in and around their easement and their gas main. And keeping in mind this is not a typical gas main in the street. It is a high volume, high pressure main transmission line of their product. And they would have a keen interest. I spoke to their folks, their supervisional people of the right-of-way out in Pennsylvania, Mr. Spencer Robinson in particular, and he had given me that direction that they would need a complete set of plans, time to review, and time to make comments. And some of the questions that gas pipeline raises would be the susceptibility to damage during the construction, The location of that single point of access and egress to the site is on that. Any other development or issues that occurred around it would be a problem. And I certainly can't speak to the complexities of the gas transmission and all its characteristics, but certainly felt in solid agreement with their folks that they needed the time to review and go over that. And also during pre-occupancy, during construction, most vulnerable, site not as well developed, the driveway system not in place. Fire apparatus, although they're large and big and weigh 40 to 80,000 pounds, are really meant to operate on hard, dry road surfaces with minimal grades. They're not good on construction sites. They're not good to get through anything other than paved surfaces. So again, during construction, most vulnerable to a fire occurring, a devastating fire. And there have been a number of these around the country just in the last year, which made national headline news out west, in the West Coast, down in Texas. And we probably all have seen some of those reports of buildings under construction, tremendous headway and hampered, the fire department greatly hampered due to site conditions, inability to work or move around and be there. So I guess what I would like you to think about as you do this, and as I advised Mr. Cochi, was, again, singularly and individually, the components and the parts of the project could be built to meet the code, but I believe firmly and strongly that when you put those parts together and you create a single point of access, high-density housing, possible lightweight construction, possible wood truss construction, combustible construction elsewhere, a park. As you pile those features together, you end up going beyond an incident or a manageable incident to one that could be catastrophic, could be a fast-spreading fire, could be certainly an environmental impact in terms of the gases, the fumes, the smoke, the products of combustion being given off, the impact on the water supply, the environmental issue of the runoff of that water supply being used for firefighting. All you have to do is look at any of the large fires you see anywhere in the news, and there's a considerable amount of water, being flowing from the building, being discharged from hose streams, and not all being converted to steam to control the fire. So I think those are concerns and those are questions. It's not only a local issue here in Milford, but of course we'll be showing you some slides in a couple of minutes of the fire in New Jersey. But even the code groups, the International Code Council and the National Fire Protection Association, have taken a keen interest in these types of issues. Underwriters Labs doing extensive fire studying on these types of issues, along with the NIST folks at the federal level. One of the big issues not only is the class of construction and the type of construction and the piling on of construction plus access plus water supply and these other issues, but in the occupied dwelling is the rapidly growing over the last decade or so, the higher BTU output, the higher heat release, the faster flashover, the faster time for a fire to spread to a full room and contents. When I started in the fire service a number of years ago, flashover was a phenomenon that took 20 or 30 minutes after ignition. And now it can occur in 3 minutes to 5 minutes, some people saying 3 or less. And flashover is full room involvement. And that's a pretty quick fire buildup. The American Wood Council is putting out some manuals. They're supposed to be coming out this month on how to deal with both for the industry, the construction industry, and the fire service for these types of projects. So again, that's my project. My task was to come up with some fire safety analysis and concerns. Again, from my perspective as the 4-decade code official operating in a local town, Windsor and Vernon, Connecticut were the 2 primary towns that I served over those years. I'll be glad to answer any questions that the commission may have. Otherwise, with your indulgence, we can move to a very brief slideshow. And you have a copy of this program, and you also have a copy of my background and my credentials. And on behalf of myself right now, thank you very much, and Mr. Cochi will take the slideshow.
Good evening again. It's Joseph Cochi. What strikes me is that the proposed project at 460 Bick Drive really presents violations of life safety standards. The fire risk, which is illustrated by the Avalon Edgewater fire, and the proximity to an Iroquois high-pressure natural gas line. will possibly create long-term safety hazards for Milford residents and the adjacent commercial properties. It's clear that 830G cannot override safety and health of residents. The density and height of this project will create significant health and safety concerns that cannot be ignored. This is a major fire hazard for the tenants and adjacent residential and commercial neighbors. In our opinion, the town of Milford may not have sufficient infrastructure to effectively fight fires at this massive and dense residential building. Tim, next slide. This is the project that Avalon, one of the best real estate developers in the country, built in Edgewater, New Jersey. And if you slip to the next slide, this project is 480 units, 4 to 5 stories, lightweight wood construction, heated by natural gas, an E-shaped building, and had significant setbacks to other properties. The subject property, 460 Bick Drive, is proposed 257 units, 5 stories, lightweight wood construction, gas lines, and also a high-pressure Iroquois natural gas transmission line, an H-shaped building, and minimal setbacks to adjacent woods, commercial buildings, and residential homes. The Avalon Edgewater project was completely engulfed in flames within 3 hours. In this fire, 240 of the 480 units were destroyed. 500 residents were permanently displaced. An additional 500 residents were rendered homeless. The fire was so intense that the firefighters had difficulty approaching the building. 500 firemen, 500 emergency responders from 35 towns were needed to control the fire. The fire broke out at 4:30 p.m. and continued for over 24 hours. And it is clear that lightweight wood construction and the gas lines were a significant contributor to the rapid expansion of the blaze. Next slide, Tim. Water resources were a critical component in fighting the Avalon fire. Because of the low water pressure and the tremendous demands in fighting the fire, the firefighters had to draw water from the Hudson River. The building was fully sprinklered, and it still could not stop the inferno. With a small fire department with limited resources, the Edgewater Fire Department relied on other closely located boroughs to provide large capacity ladder fire equipment to help fight the fire. Next slide. Next slide. What is curious is that the same identical building burned in the year 2000. Same developer, Avalon, same location, Avalon Edgewater, and during construction, the same complex burned to the ground. And the fire responders were not able to put it out. Next slide. We've learned that Milford has 4 ladder trucks, and basically the question is the equipment sufficient to fight a fire of this magnitude? I don't know the answer. I don't think Ray Walker knows the answer either. This is an imponderable issue. The proposed 460 Bick Drive complex has very limited access to the sides and the back of the building, and water pressure is a factor on Bick Drive. There have been repeated complaints concerning water pressure from commercial neighbors as well as residential neighbors. The next slide shows the proposed site plan, and if you look at the upper left corner, the means of egress and access to the site is right adjacent to our property at 500 Bick Drive. So there are 2 major driveways right at that point. We have approximately 400 cars on the 500 Bick site, and the 257 apartment dwellers would use the same point to access and exit the 460 Bick Drive site. My own concern is that there will be traffic tie-ups that are very difficult to solve if this driveway is located in that location, right next to our main driveway. Final slide concerning the Avalon Edgewater fire. The Edgewater police chief stated that water pressure was an issue, and he said that the sprinkler lines could not handle the water volume needed to put out the flames. The building sprinklers were working, but the lightweight wood structure fueled the flames and made fighting the fire difficult. In 2000, as I stated, a fire started at the same location where a 5-story condominium complex was under construction, and it destroyed 9 adjacent homes and damaged several others. Assemblyman Scott Rumana from Wayne, New Jersey, said he's working on legislation that will put a moratorium of up to 2 years on the approval and construction of multifamily housing developments until the state's building code is revised. That's in New Jersey. And the lightweight wood construction used to build the Edgewater complex is the reason that the fire raced through the apartment complex so quickly, said Mr. Rumana, and buildings constructed with such highly flammable materials are virtual tinderboxes. So I just have a few more remarks. The principal concern that we all have is the water pressure on Bick Drive. Northeast Electronics and other neighbors have filed written complaints concerning the water pressure in this location. At 500 Bick Drive, we have a 250,000-gallon supplemental water tank to fight fires in the event that public water pressure is inadequate. This applicant proposes a booster pump for the site, and my question is, how does the applicant propose to get water to the booster pump? We don't have access to the Housatonic River from this location. Next question is, how would blasting to construct the underground parking garage impact the high-pressure natural gas transmission line? We have blasted ledge before at a property which we used to own in Fairfield County, and walls cracked in a building which was over 400 feet away from the blasting. The commission, I believe, needs to thoroughly analyze the impact of blasting on the natural gas transmission line, which is less than 70 feet from the proposed blasting area. The applicant proposes 1 driveway, 1 access in, and 1 access out. Planning and Zoning in Fairfield recently rejected an 8-30G development proposed by the same applicant, Garden Homes, based on the fact that fire trucks had inadequate means of access and egress and an inadequate turning radius. The same significant life safety issues are present here. The applicant is proposing truss construction, and as Ray Walker has demonstrated, the sprinkler heads are below the trusses, and the air pockets above the trusses can permit these fires to spread rapidly. These apartment complexes can become death traps. I recently attended a legislative hearing in New Haven on February 5th, and the legislators who attended discussed the 257-unit apartment complex which is proposed for 460 Bick Drive, and the fact that there is a major Iroquois gas transmission line on this site. The forthcoming decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission concerning this proposed development has already achieved statewide attention, and I think it's safe to say that it will also achieve national attention because of the recent fire at Avalon Edgewater. The town of Milford is widely known for its excellent fire department and buildings department. These groups are dedicated to strict adherence to building codes, thorough inspections, and the protection of local residents and businesses. I feel strongly that under normal circumstances, Milford's Planning and Zoning Commission would never consider approving this project because of safety and density concerns. There is ample and compelling evidence for Planning and Zoning to turn down this proposed development. To summarize, the life safety concerns are as follows. First, blasting of ledge to create the underground garage and the potential for damage to the high-pressure natural gas transmission line. Second, the clear risk of fire risk of lightweight wood truss construction. This type of construction directly contributed to the destruction of the Avalon Edgewater project and other apartment complexes nationwide. Third, the issue of a fire on this site and how it would impact the natural gas transmission line and the safety of residents and commercial neighbors. Fourth, the documented issue concerning the inadequate water pressure on Bick Drive. And fifth, the issue of a single driveway as the access and egress point to this site and the difficulty of fire response under these conditions. The Town of Fairfield Planning and Zoning Commission recently and appropriately rejected an 8-30G application from Garden Homes Management based on this life safety issue. In my opinion, this is a flawed project which has the potential to cause major destruction and loss of life, either during the blasting of ledge to create the underground garage, during the construction period, or after the proposed apartment complex is completed and occupied. I urge you to deny this application based on the significant life safety issues which are evident in abundance here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board before we open this up for public comment? Seeing none. Mr. Nickel.
Yeah, unless my eyes are deceiving me, the entranceway, the one-way in and out, is 28 feet wide. Is that correct? Yes? Okay. A normal pickup truck, a Ford F-150, a Silverado, a Toyota Tundra, is 230 inches long. That's almost 20 feet. So just by my deduction, if you put two pickup trucks back to back, you cannot use that road. On the same token, if you put two SUVs back to back, you cannot go down that road. What do you plan on parking down there? Golf carts?
All right. So we'll open this up for the public comment portion of tonight's meeting. If you spoke at a prior meeting, there's no need to repeat your comments. If you want to touch upon something new, then by all means feel free to do that. But what you said at the last meeting is officially part of the record. If you want to talk, if you could please approach the podium, clearly state your name and address, and please spell your name for the record. Address all comments to the commission. If your comments have been previously presented, you could simply say that you agree with the comments that were said before you. Keep your comments clear and succinct, and please keep your comments under 3 minutes. If anyone is against the application, you could come forward.
I'm Dottie Bateman, B-A-T-E-M-A-N, president of the Caswell Cove Condo Association on the other end of Bick Drive. One of the points that was made last week was regarding a water study done in 1985. Caswell Cove was built in 1989. 4 years after that study, that was deemed adequate. With 204 units, approximately 400 people. So I just wanted to make that correction and make it known. Please deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Emily Monis, Caswell Cove, 525 Pope's Island Road. One of the points that was brought up tonight, again, on life safety, when they were talking about blasting ledge, the Iroquois pipeline, I think, is a major consideration, but also Bick has fuel tanks, butane tanks on the property. So if they're going to be blasting, is that going to disturb the structure? Could there be some additional problems with the Bick butane tanks? So that was my comment, and again, I also agree that we should deny the application based on life safety. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to let the people that haven't spoke speak now.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Dado, 21 Wiley Ave. I did speak about water pressure before, but I talked to the Water Authority today, asking what the water pressure is at that property on Bick Drive, and it's 28 PSI. And usually the lowest range they have is 25 PSI, and it goes all the way up to 125. So that's something to think about. That pressure, that property at 460 Bick Drive is 28 PSI. And I also asked about water tanks on the roofs, which sounded kind of ridiculous to me. But the water company said that probably wouldn't be allowed to have water tanks on the roofs. So it's just something to consider when we're talking about the water pressure issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also should have said, if you have any written comments or petitions you'd like to make part of the record, now would be the time to present them.
Hi, Deborah Weinstein, 131 Pope's Island Road, Caswell Cove. I was hoping to get the traffic report this week, but I know that one of the members of the board last time said he stood at that light for like 2 lights before he went through. I just want to add, in the summertime, I have sat there for at least 5 or 6 lights. Also now during the winter, the road, the exit where cars will come onto is at the top of a hill. It is very icy coming down that hill. Cars are going to be exiting right there and coming down, and that's just looking for a lot of accidents to happen. I hope you're going to deny this.
Good evening. My name is Lee Ferrano. I live at 77 Audubon Close, and I represent the Audubon Manor Condominium Association. We live quite close to the area, and again, I echo the comments that other people have made regarding traffic. The traffic situations, I've never seen that so bad as morning time with the people going to work and then people coming home in the afternoon. With the gentleman's explanations over here, I am even more startled about the idea that you may approve this project. I'd also like to present 2 petitions signed by people in our area regarding their disapproval of Garden Homes Management putting up this project.
If you could just state and spell your name so we have it for the record, please.
Ferrano, F as in Frank, U-R-A-N-O.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Michael Lucian, L-U-T-I-A-N. I live at 419 West Rutland Road, just around the corner from this proposed development. And I did want to comment on several things. There is a lot of traffic coming down West Rutland Road as a main approach for people across town going to the transfer station, for example. And I think putting a high-density apartment building in here isn't going to help with that. And in trying to get to the Post Road US 1 over the train tracks, there's plenty of traffic even from Subway World Headquarters, and with the amount of people that would be living at this site, I think it would really exacerbate that issue of getting to the Post Road for the residents in our area. One of the other things I wanted to mention was, you look at tonight's compelling argument about the life safety, and it really strikes home to me that, we have to ask everybody involved to step back and, really take consideration of everything that was spoken about. The best way to mistake-proof against a disaster, however remote people may argue that it would be, the best way to mistake-proof it is to disapprove this petition. Thank you.
My name is Lee Williams, L-E-E, and I live in 18 Ruth Ann Terrace. And I'm going to read what I read 2 weeks ago when they had the New Haven Housing Authority, and this was my witness that I made there. My wife and I are against the change proposed to the Milford Planning and Zoning for a permit to construct 257 residential units under CGS 8-30G at 460 Bick Drive. We live within 500 feet of this property. We were distressed to hear that some of the hearings just had that two little signs which we never saw, and so we didn't say anything before this. This change from single family to cluster multiple housing would put a strain on the local school systems, thus higher taxes, increase vehicle traffic flow significantly, and lower housing values if you're able to sell it all when the time comes. We have been in our residential home for 45 years. Many of our neighbors are longtime residents also, and it is an excessive amount of units in a small 7+ acre piece of property that once was 2 residential houses. And this sounds to me like one alderman in Milford said, warehousing families. Location, 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 the old real estate proclamation, seems to be good for the developer owner, but not good for residential housing owners surrounding this project. And we feel a much more acceptable usage of this property would be smaller amount of condominiums or an active age 55 and older community with ownership involved. People that own have much more at stake and take care of their property versus rentals. We believe it will only start with a minimum of 30% low income rented beyond market rate and quickly go well beyond the 30%. And we know where they're going to come from. And it's going to be just jammed with people and kids. Enclosed is a sheet of 14 local signatures objecting to the construction. These are local neighbors, all within 300 feet to 1,000 foot of this property. Many more residential neighbors would object to this construction, but with short notice, I was only able to obtain the 14. The questions and concerns I have. Our property line is approximately 80-foot buffer zone to the Algonquin-Iroquois high-pressure gas pipeline. Why doesn't this apply to this total project? And and I watched them when they put the pipes in, and they radiographed every welding joint, just to give you an example of the control that they have on this high-pressure line. Any kind of disruption, I mean, they fly over the thing to see if there's any leakage of the pipe. It's a very dangerous line. And why doesn't this apply to the total this project? It talked about in the paper about putting a parking lot over the corner of the high pressure line. And the other concern I have is will the parking lot runoff be filtered? In other words, oil droppings that are going to occur as required by other towns. I saw it done in Fairfield where they required a church to be totally filtered and all kinds of multi-million-dollar controls for the runoff of water. Most of the water will run down from the parking lot, I assume, right down into the Bick Drive area where our houses are. And I've seen it where it's flooded before. And I question whether the runoff from this will be, and it goes right into the wetlands, which is strips of land right on either side of Bick Drive. And will this additional water cause flooding? And that's a concern I have. And the other thing is, has Environmental Protection Agency been notified of these proposed changes to this fragile environment? So those are my concerns. I have 6 copies if somebody wants a copy for your record.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want to submit your petition, you should at least submit 1 copy. If you want to submit your petition, you should submit 1 copy now. Yes.
Tony Marola, 12 Burn Swamp Road in Woodbridge. I also have a financial interest in 500 Bick Drive. Some of my concerns are the construction of this property that's proposed for the 460 Big Drive is it's been shown that, as Joe's shown, in Edgewater, New Jersey, how it has burned to the ground. Also, there was 2 similar fires to that in 2011 and 2013 with the same type of construction. Once the fire barrier is penetrated, the fire, moves rapidly through the building, and it's hard to contain the fire. So my question is, what studies have been done to show that there's a sufficient amount of water supply in the event a fire erupts at this property? And if there's not a sufficient amount of water supply to sustain the fire at this property, if it was to happen, and it was to spread to adjoining properties as well, how would the fire department then be able to control the fire at that point? So that's one of my concerns, is the water supply for this property over there. And if a study's been done for it or not, to show that it's a sufficient amount of water supply to sustain the fire in the event one happens. That's it.
Good evening. My name is James Franklin Burdo. I live at 12 Ruth Ann Terrace. Last name is spelled B-U-R-D-O. I have 2 concerns. One is traffic through the Caswell-Naugatuck Avenue intersection. If you are traveling down Naugatuck Avenue at the speed limit and the light turns yellow as you reach the line, you cannot clear the intersection before the green light comes on for the traffic for Caswell Avenue and Bick Drive. The second concern is, last week on Tuesday and Wednesday, I went through that intersection 3 times. 2 of those 3 times, I saw cars go through the intersection from Caswell Avenue onto Bick Drive after my light had turned green. The intersection is dangerous to begin with. In addition of 150 cars during rush hour is going to create a great deal of problem. The second concern is the amount of parking for this building. My understanding is that there is approximately 1.3 parking spaces per apartment. I understand they are all studio and single-bedroom apartments, with a proposal to add an additional amount of parking which would still bring it under 1.5 vehicles per unit. My father owns 2 3-bedroom families in this city. In both of those buildings, we assign parking places to people. I have one apartment that was assigned 2 parking spaces, and the tenants decided that they needed 4 cars in the building, partly because the people who signed the lease then decided to bring in additional people to live with them. The other apartment is, again, a single person, again, has brought in a friend, formerly her boss, someone who owns an apartment building in another city. She is a low-income person receiving subsidies. And again, we've gone from 1 car to 2. I don't think that 1.3 vehicles per unit in this building, once you sign leases, if you've got single professionals and they have a friend who moves in with them, a fiance, they're planning to get married, you're going to wind up with more vehicles than this parking lot can handle. Thank you.
My name is Robert Healy, H-E-A-L-Y. My question touches the aspect of the height of the building, and my question is very simple. If you take a 4-story building where it is on top of that hill, it would be like a beacon on top of a hill. Once you'll be able to see that building from almost 4 corners of the city, and especially when you're coming off the bridges, any of the bridges, by the way. I'm concerned for site pollution, what it does to the valuation of the surrounding properties. And I think it doesn't give a good name to the good city of Milford. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is State Representative Kim Rose. I live at 292 Naugatuck Avenue in Milford. Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the board, I'm here to speak to you tonight in opposition to this application. The state statute was written, in essence, to provide affordable housing to those people who can't normally afford to live in a town. And I don't think there's one person in this room tonight that is against affordable housing. As a matter of fact, I would venture to guess that quite a few people sitting here tonight probably do qualify to live in the apartment complex that's being proposed on Bick Drive. However, I do believe the state statute was well-intentioned in meaning that they would provide safe, quality, affordable housing for people. And from the testimony that I've heard this evening on speaking on the fire issues, the gas line, it doesn't, in my opinion, appear to be a safe application whatsoever. This is nothing more than developer greed in trying to make the most of what they can with a piece of parcel of land with no regard for the people that are going to be living in these apartments. There's not going to be ample parking. They're going to be piled on top of each other, and it's just not a safe, good development, and I urge you to vote against it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else against the application? Is there anyone?
Good evening. My name is Susan Falsigno. It's Falcigno, and I live at 105 Benjamin Heights Drive, which is right in the immediate area of the construction here. I just want to go on record as totally opposed to this development, and I hope you all consider it deeply. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Linda Hayes-Lucian, Hayes-Lutin. I reside at 419 West Rutland Road, which is a few blocks away from the proposed development. I would like to go on record in opposing this development. I don't think it's a quality development, and I don't think it will add value to our neighborhood or our city. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brian Glynn, Glynn. I live at 26 Deer Run Trail, which it's a cul-de-sac that backs up pretty close to the location. If anyone's gotten off of 95, which is pretty close, we're trying to get on or get off at commuting times, you could sit there for 5-10 minutes trying to make the left to go up Naugatuck due to the traffic coming down from all the factories there. I'd like to go on record as going against this application. Thank you.
Hello, committee. My name is Patrick Stirk. I live at 1100 Naugatuck Avenue, STIRK. We've been talking about traffic that goes from Naugatuck to Bick. I'd like to talk about the traffic that comes from Bick into Naugatuck. I live right at the corner of Wiley, and there's a stop sign currently there. Traffic runs that stop sign repeatedly. I have 3 children. Can't play in the front yard, can't get close. My mailbox has been taken out twice in the 8 years I've lived there. Just traffic not stopping at that stop sign. 2 letters to the police department. Nothing seems to stop that traffic from going through that intersection. I think increasing the amount of traffic through that area, which is all residential, will greatly put families in danger, including mine. Thank you.
My name is Pat Gutierrez. I talked at the January meeting. The only thing I'm here to say is the fact that when Bick was there, we didn't have subway, we didn't have any of the things on, or most of them on, Bick Drive. So the traffic has increased since Bick has left also. That's all I wanted to say.
Tony Merle, I'd like to make one more comment regarding the water pressure. At 500 Big Drive, there's currently 4 buildings there, and there's water pumps that are used to circulate the water throughout the 4 buildings. There are several times when we have had problems with the water pumps there due to the lack of water pressure when there's a substantial amount of water being used in those 4 buildings. With that being said, and the water pressure being low in those 4 buildings, what will happen in the event of a fire, as I reiterated before in my previous comments. I just wanted to make that comment that 500 Big Drive does have water pressure problems right now. So my concern is, once again, the water pressure isn't adequate enough, and who did a study regarding the water pressure, if it's sufficient enough to handle a fire if one was to occur.
My name is James F. Berto, Jr. I reside at 12 Ruth Ann Terrace. I have been a resident at that residence since November of 1955. I have seen the Turnpike go through. I have seen Bick Drive go through at the insistence of Mr. Bick. I have also seen the Iroquois Park, gas pipeline go through. It abuts my property, and I don't mind because my privacy has never been affected by any of this. But I have never seen anything so high-handed and underhanded as dropping 5-story or 4-story buildings on a property that really is going to be an eyesore, is all I can say. I will come out to the end of my street on Naugatuck Avenue and look up at this hill and see nothing but tall buildings. It wouldn't be so bad if they were even 2 stories, but to have a 5 or 4-story building, and the traffic is going to be enormous, because I have gone down the street from my place of residence and watched people come barreling through without all the people that will be coming down there. Red lights, it doesn't matter. They just keep coming. Thank you.
If anyone is in favor of the application, you could come to the podium.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joseph Versteeg, V-E-R-S-T-E-E-G. I am the principal of Versteeg Associates, a Torrington, Connecticut-based building code and fire code consulting firm, and we have been retained by Garden Homes Management for the design of this project to assist the architect. First, I've provided a document to the panel, as well as last time we were here, I provided a resume, a CV. So we'll just go through some of the items from talking points. I will not read it. Just a little bit about my background. I was the former commanding officer of the Technical Services Section within the Connecticut State Fire Marshal's Office, wherein all building code and fire code activities reported directly to me, in addition to serving in the capacity of supervisor as well as inspectors in those units. I'm a certified building official and fire marshal in the state of Connecticut. I'm a certified fire protection specialist through the Fire Protection Specialist Board at the National Fire Protection Association. I am a principal member of the technical committees on means of egress and residential occupancies of the National Fire Protection Association's Life Safety Code, as well as the NFPA Building Construction and Safety Code. I'm a principal member and former chairperson of the technical committees on structures and materials and building construction for the building code, as well as the standard on construction types and the standard on fire barrier walls of the National Fire Protection Association. I'm a contributing author to the National Fire Protection Association's NFPA 1, which serves as Connecticut's Fire Prevention Code and Handbook, and the Life Safety Inspection Manual. I am also co-author of the book, Performing Plan Reviews for Code Compliance. Now, in speaking to the building, this building, with its construction classification, its arrangement of exits, its arrangement of corridors, its height, the materials used within the building, the fire protection systems installed, which are all required by code, satisfy the current Connecticut State Building Code, the current Connecticut Fire Safety Code, as well as the Connecticut Fire Prevention Code. There has been no mention that this building in any way violates those requirements. In addition, Connecticut is looking, and has been for several years, at developing the next generation of codes for Connecticut. The estimate is somewhere in the fall of this coming year, 2015. And in evaluating this building design to those proposed regulations, we are in compliance with future codes. In fact, we are in compliance with future codes that are out there at the national level that Connecticut has not even thought about adopting as yet. One of the concepts of a building is to confine the fire to the smallest possible compartment. And they do that through the use of fire barriers, walls and floors that have a 1 or a 2-hour fire resistance rating to them for passage of heat and smoke. And the building, this building, is required to have floors that have fire barriers so fire cannot readily spread from floor to floor vertically. It is required to have walls and floors and ceilings that surround each one of the individual apartments to confine the fire to the most likely point of origin, i.e. inside the living unit, and keep it from spreading to the adjacent unit. The egress corridors through which you walk, such as the ones out here, are required to have a fire resistance rating, as well as doors that are self-closing and positive latching, again to confine that fire and protect the occupant's egress route. And the stairs are enclosed by fire barriers. Those 4 exit stairs that take the people down and out of the building to the outside are protected to an even higher level of safety. If even to say that they're supposed to be inside the stair, the environment is supposed to be just as good as being outside. Now, the scope of the Connecticut Building Code states that compliance with Connecticut codes ensure a building and environment that provides not only for the public health, safety, and welfare of the building occupants and surrounding community, it also provides protection for firefighters and emergency responders. And this is the result of stringent requirements governing construction materials, structural stability and strength, egress facilities, energy conservation, fire protection, and features associated with the interior environment, such as light, ventilation, sanitation, and healthy air. Now, it's important to note that Connecticut utilizes a national consensus document. It utilizes the International Building Code, which is promulgated by the International Code Council. Each panel for different topics within. The members are experts in their own field, as well as the Connecticut Fire Safety Code, which is patterned after a National Fire Protection Association document. And Connecticut specifically takes those national documents and amends them for use within the state of Connecticut for Connecticut's needs and demographics and fire history. And there has never been any input from the State Codes and Standards Committee, the State Building Inspector or State Fire Marshal, Connecticut Fire Marshals Association, Connecticut Building Officials Association, Connecticut Architects Society, and Connecticut Engineering Organizations, as well as input from the public at various administrative and legislative hearings in the adoption of these codes that has been contrary or negative to this type of construction. And note that the legislature, state legislature, has guaranteed that administrative regulations adopted by the state of Connecticut agencies are not done so in a vacuum. It is an open process. This degree of compliance, as stated earlier, with the codes is ensured through rigid plan review and inspections by the Milford building official and the Milford Fire Marshal's office. No permit can be issued until by statute substantial compliance has been determined with the codes, the plans and specifications, and if it hasn't, you don't get a building permit. The building is then inspected, and only then are items signed off and a certificate of occupancy issued prior to occupancy by any tenant. There are also, because this is a residential occupancy, it is also required that the fire marshal, on a yearly basis, conduct inspections of this building in all aspects to ensure that everything is maintained in proper working order, and licensed contractors are required at periodic inspections to inspect, maintain, and test the sprinkler systems, the standpipes, as well as the fire alarm system to ensure they're in proper order and provide that written documentation to the fire marshal. And if the fire marshal so desires, he can witness that testing to ensure it's being done properly. There is also a process in the state for code officials for enforcement for a wide range of tools, from civil injunctions to close or restrict the use of a building if a violation occurs, or criminal prosecution for violations and not complying with the code. Now, there's been some talk about the Edgewater, New Jersey fire, and there were some dramatic pictures of it. I will tell you that there's no final investigative report been issued by New Jersey. So anyone who tells you that they know what's going on with that fire, the Edgewood Fire Marshal doesn't know, the state building official in New Jersey doesn't know, and the state fire marshal in New Jersey doesn't know. And that's why they've all initiated additional investigations to look into issues like, were there code violations in that building that contributed to that fire? Was that building up to code? And did those code violations, if they were present, contribute to that fire? There's also been some discussion about a delay in reporting that fire of 15 minutes. We're hearing from the state fire marshal in New Jersey that the delay might have been up to 40 minutes, and that they started the fire in the wall by pipe with the torch, and then they didn't realize they started the fire. And then once they did realize, about 20, 30 minutes later, that's when the clock for the 15 minutes started. So there's no final report. We really don't know what happened. There's arguments about the fire started on the upper floor, got into the truss roof, and yet we're hearing from the state fire marshal that in all likelihood the fire started on the first floor and got into a ceiling cavity. So to make a correlation, it's a great video, it is a tragic occurrence, it is a big fire, but to draw a correlation with that building, we don't know what's going on yet. And I will tell you that as the former chairman and representative of the International Fire Marshals Association for the Technical Committee on Building Construction for the last 10 years, the topic of wood frame construction, lightweight wood construction for multifamily residential buildings has never been raised as a proposal. Never. And there have been no proposals to alter either the International Building Code or the Connecticut Building Code. Now, as far as the protection system for sprinklers, sprinklers are designed to do one thing: to keep the atmosphere within the room cool. As far as Mr. Walker talked about, the concept of flashover, we know that heat energy rises, it collects at the ceiling, it radiates heat energy down like a broiler, and things come up to auto-ignition temperature, and they sort of spontaneously combust, they auto-ignite. So sprinkler systems are up in that initial heat flow, and they're designed to spray water droplets throughout that heat jet and cool the atmosphere. And they do a pretty damn good job of putting the fire out. So we know that statistically, that one sprinkler, just one sprinkler on the system, operates in 70% of the fires. Not 3, not 4, not 500, one. And we know that that one sprinkler controls 93% of the fires when it does operate. Now, does the Connecticut State Building Code allow the use of a 13R sprinkler system? Absolutely. But there was no written testimony to say otherwise, and it's a valid sprinkler system. It does its job. Also understand that this building, because of its height, will have a standpipe system. Many of you have been in stairwells in commercial buildings or hospitals where you see that large red pipe in the corner and there's a valve on it. That's where the fire department comes and hooks up their hose, because it's not practical to take a hose from the fire truck, drag it across the lawn, drag it up 3 or 4 stories, and then drag it down the hallway and fight the fire. It's way too much hose. So it's easier to connect the fire truck to the building, charge the standpipes with the water, and then the fire department merely carries what they call a hose pack. They go up to the floor where there's a fire, they connect, and they're carrying minimal hose. So this building is required to have standpipes, and there will be one in each stair, as well as in the garage as required. The building is protected throughout with a fire alarm system. When the sprinkler system activates, it senses water flow. It sounds the building alarm throughout the building. It also transmits an alarm off-site to Wells Fargo, ADT, some central monitoring station that then in turn calls the fire department. If anybody were to turn a valve for the sprinkler system off, it sends a signal to the fire department through Wells Fargo and says somebody's turning the water off or tampering with it. So any kind of adjustment to that system that in any way affects the effectiveness of that sprinkler system, those valves and controls are all going to be supervised. If for some reason there were a fire pump on this property and we lost electrical power to the fire pump, that would also be supervised. So there's a high degree of reliability because of the required maintenance and testing by licensed contractors. And if the sprinkler system for any reason is required to be offline, either due to we're repairing it, or there was a break, or the water in the street went off, the fire code requires that the fire marshal and the fire department be notified of such, and you have to either evacuate the building or establish an approved fire watch. So there are provisions for you to stay in the building, but it's under direct fire marshal control. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about water pressure, and rightfully so. It is not my intent to give you a seminar on hydraulic calculations. But for anything, a toilet or a sprinkler system to work, you need two components. You need water, and you need pressure to move that water. Now, the water company has told us, and someone said it today, and we concur with that because they got the same information we did from the water company, that the water supply in the street is a 16-inch diameter pipe. It has a flow of 2,396 gallons per minute of water. It's an unlimited supply, and it has two pressures. The pressure of the water not moving, which is called static at 28 psi, and then obviously when you start to move that water, the pressure goes down. If you've ever taken a garden hose and squeezed it, that initial shot of water goes very far, and then it starts to do what? Normalize. And that's the residual pressure, and that's 22. When you do the calculations in accordance with NFPA 291 for what we call fire flow, you have an available 2,795 gallons per minute of an unlimited supply at 20 psi residual pressure. Now, what does that mean? Well, you've heard testimony about some of the toilets not quite flushing, and it takes a long time for the shower and so forth. Well, that's governed by the building code. The Connecticut Building Code and the Connecticut Plumbing Code says that a house with water has to have adequate pressure. And there's a table for toilets and sinks and bidets and you name it. There's a table for it, and it tells you the minimum required water in gallons per minute. So typically a toilet requires 3 gallons a minute, a sink may require 4 gallons a minute, and what's the minimum pressure? 8. So if I'm connected to a water main in the street that has 2,500 gallons a minute, roughly, without getting into smaller numbers, and it runs that water through the pipe at 22 gallons a minute, should it get to my toilet and provide me the 8 pounds per square inch I need and provide me the 4 gallons? Code says it has to. And what if it doesn't? What if I'm way up in a hill and it takes too much energy to move the water? Then the code says, where you don't meet these minimums, you have to put in a water pressure booster system. Whether you pump the water up the hill and store it, how many live on a house with a well? That's exactly what we do. We suck it out of the water, we put it in a pressurized tank, and when you need to use it, it's got pressure and it's got volume. In high rises, you can't push water up to the 85th floor for a toilet, because although it's the proper operating pressure at the 85th floor, the guy on the first floor, it's going to blow him through the wall. So we modulate that pressure within the buildings. Okay? And the building code says that where you have too much pressure, anytime you go over 80 psi, you have to do what? Reduce it. We don't want you going into a shower and turning on a faucet and getting hit with over 80 psi of water. You're likely to get knocked against the wall. So this is already covered by the building code. If there are inadequacies in your homes or in your properties, I would suggest you hire someone to look at, are we compliant with the building code? Now, when it comes to fire service, if there's a fire, we talk about fire flows, and there's 2 types. One, this is for the systems in the building. Remember, we have an automatic fire sprinkler system that should there be sufficient heat in the area of the fire, it's automatically going to melt the fusible ink, and water at the proper pressure will discharge in a conical spray pattern, cool that, and in 93% of the cases put that fire out. Now, we told you that you get about 22 pounds of pressure at the street. I might need somewhere up around 60 gallons, 60 psi. Well, coming out of the street's only 22. I'm not going to get 65 at that sprinkler at the most remote point. And the worst case scenario are those standpipes I talked to that the fire department hooks up to. The code says that I have to provide 500 gallons per minute for the first standpipe, and then 250 gallons a minute for every other standpipe, but never more than 1,000 gallons. So my standpipe system's gonna require 1,000 gallons per minute, which is okay because I have how much in the street? 2,500 gallons. I have more than enough water. What I don't have is enough pressure to provide 100 pounds per square inch so that the firefighter gets an effective stream out of the end of his hose rather than just a little garden dribble. He needs 100 PSI. So how do I achieve that? Fire pump. And that's very common. We do that in a lot of sprinkler systems. Now, the second concern we have is what happens if, for some reason, the sprinkler's turned off. It was out of service, we knew about it, and at that same time, cataclysmically, there was a fire. Well, now we're totally dependent on who? The fire department. There are calculations that are done in accordance with industry standards. The National Fire Protection Association has NFPA 1 that we use. The International Fire Code has the International Fire Code. There is the National Fire Academy calculation. There is the ISO, or the Insurance Services Organization, that we do calculations on, and we take into account the building, what it's made out of, and obviously we would need more water if it's made out of wood, we would need less if it's made out of concrete. We take the area of the building, we add up all these floors, and we get a total area of over 100,000 square feet, and we do the math, and those standards tell us you're only going to need 2,000 gallons per minute. Well, how much do I have in the street? 2,500. So we have more than enough water, more than enough pressure for domestic, probably not enough pressure for fire service. We put a fire pump in. That's a standard fire department fire system item. So we're not concerned with that. Now, in closing, to rebut a few points. We talked about, there was discussion about the single access point into the site. And that's true. And notice that that's all the code talked about. That's all the code requires, a single access point. We talked about that last time. Mr. Nichols, we didn't intend to put you off and not answer your question. It was more of a statement. We knew what you were looking for and we were going to address it. You will each have, if you didn't hand out, there is a site plan with turning radiuses from the fire trucks showing you the ability for the fire truck to turn off of Bick Road into the facility, maneuver throughout the facility, more than enough width as required by the Fire Prevention Code. And in fact, Chief Healy has looked at this and approved this, and we have written documentation that this is acceptable. One of the things that's often brought up if you're not in a driver of an emergency vehicle is that it's very difficult to make that right-hand turn. It's very difficult to make that right-hand turn in my car or my pickup truck. How could a fire truck get in? Well, a fire truck doesn't make the same turn you do. The fire truck does what? Turns on its lights and siren, and in accordance with the state statutes, it's deemed an emergency vehicle, and people have to pull to the right and allow them to maneuver. And they go way out into the left-hand lane, and they make that wider turn in. That's very typical. We've had arguments that the left front fender of the fire truck has to cross over the yellow line when it makes that right turn. You mean like the school bus does 4 times a day? Yeah, so these access ways work. The other issue is there was some discussion about the adjoining property having a 250,000 gallon tank. The sprinkler standards only require one water source, whether it be a water main like we have in the street, whether it be a pressurized water tank, or whether it be a pond. There is never a requirement to have 2 unless you're in a high seismic zone like Los Angeles and you're a high-rise building or a hospital, because the concern is the ground shaking would break the main, and now how do I have fire protection? Typically, in industrial occupancies, a secondary water source is a mandate from the insurance company. We will insure you, and here's your premium for only having one water source. You get a much lower premium if you have a second water source. Why? Because we as insurers expect to pay out less if you have a fire, because we're comfortable with the fact that you will never have a sprinkler system without a water supply. And in some cases, you can't get the water. We have seen plastics factories that require 5,000 and 6,000 gallons a minute because of the plastics that are being manufactured, the way they're being manufactured, the way they're being stored on high rack storage, so it's like kindling, and there's just no way to provide 4,000 to 5,000 gallons through a main. So they take the 2,000 that's available through the main for the water company, and then they supplement that with a tank, and the fire pump blends that together in the system to give them the 4,000 to 5,000 or 6,000 gallons. So the fact that the adjoining property has a tank in no way reflects on this building, because we talked about the water. There was mention about the garage, about I can't drive a fire truck into the garage. I don't know why you'd want to. I wouldn't put a fire truck in the garage. I wouldn't put one in the building. Remember, there are standpipes inside the building that the fire truck is going to connect to. Firemen are going to go in with the hoses. Remember that the fumes and the smoke that were talked about, we all wear now self-contained breathing apparatus so that we're not subject to that. Is there going to be heat? Sure. But remember, what's the idea behind a sprinkler system? It activates and cools the atmosphere. So a sprinklered fire, it's more like a warm, snotty, uncomfortable environment if you've ever been in a building that's been on fire with a sprinkler system. And I have sat through 22 of those FEMA tests where they set their room on fire while you're in it. Now, maybe they were trying to tell me something, but I will tell you it's a warm, snotty, uncomfortable environment. There was concern raised about the Iroquois pipeline and blasting. I will tell you, as the commanding officer of the Technical Services Section at the Office of State Fire Marshal, we regulate blasting. And prior to any blasting anywhere, it requires the fire marshal, as Ray would know, to issue a permit for blasting. The permit is contingent upon notifying all of the neighbors. There are pre-blast meetings to see what concerns there are going to be in the neighborhood. And I will tell you that the Iroquois pipeline people are going to have a lot to say about how much vibration is going to be allowed in the ground. I can tell you when they did blasting along Route 7 in Wilton, that the Iroquois pipeline paralleled the road, and there was TRW, which has all of the machines and computers that collect data and sales accounts and receivable from all over the world. They were not allowed, their mandate was that any blast could not generate any more seismic activity or rumbling of a ground than a weighted, and they gave us the weight of a tractor trailer going down Route 7 at 40 miles per hour, and they set up seismographs. And their people watched it. And at any point in time, it got excessive. They went, that's it. And blasting stopped, and you had to reevaluate what are we doing wrong and how far. So it prolongs the blasting job, but it's really done in a very safe manner. There are regulations that take that into account. There was concern about the construction phase. The building code has a chapter in it for buildings under construction. The fire code has a chapter in it for buildings under construction. There are requirements in there for if you put gates on the construction site, how the fire department has to have access to those gates, the locks, the keys, and the gates have to be wide enough so the fire truck can get in. There was talk about the fire truck getting stuck in mud. There's requirements in the code for enough integrity of the driveway into the construction site to support the fire truck. No overhangs or low wires to prevent that. There's also the fact that the fire hydrant has to be on site and energized, because we do expect fires during this construction phase, and we don't have all our protections and compartmentation in place. In addition, the code requires that as the building goes up and you put a floor on the building, then the standpipe for fire department use is energized and tested to that level. So when it goes up 1 story above grade, the standpipe goes up and is energized. When we complete the floor in the next part, the standpipe goes up, because it's very difficult to fight a fire in a wide open building by shooting water at it from the ground. It allows us to get a hose up on that floor. There's requirements for clearing combustibles, manage of flammable liquids, combustible liquids. So all of these issues are covered by the code, and your fire marshal in Milford is well aware of those requirements and more than competent and able to deal with those. Now, the last item was that there was some discussion about how this wood frame construction is some evil stuff, and that it's being looked at by the Wood Council. Yeah, I have that document. As the chairman of the Building Code Committee on Construction, I was asked to do a peer review of it. It's about a 20-page educational document geared towards fire marshals and firemen saying, do you understand the concepts of a truss? Now, I will tell you, trusses have been falling down for years. We've been killing firemen for 60 years with steel trusses, long before we invented wood truss. The common thread in training firefighters before you attack a building is know your building. Before you charge in, are there chemicals in there? Are there electrical rooms? Are there hazards? Are there dangers? And if you don't know, then you're taught what? Don't go in. It's a building. The NIST and the UL research that was done, the National Institute of Science and Technology, and I know Danny Matarowski from NIST, we've been on committees since the 80s together. The UL research that is done is focusing on a change in the way fire departments attack fires based on the material contents in the building. As Ray said, in the old days, your mattress was horsehair. Now it's foam, so there's more BTU, there's more heat, there's more smoke. We have to change the way we fight fires, but we really didn't understand, should we not, what were the parameters, and that was the result of the NIST study and the UL research, and we now know the answers. And now it's a matter of a paradigm shift for fire departments and showing them how to fight fires. Instead of exhausting, maybe we should be pressurizing the building. And there have been no proposals before the International Building Code or the International Fire Code to deal with truss construction, or what is called lightweight truss, lightweight wood construction. And the NFPA Building Code has not received any changes. And we're in the development phase of the 2018 code. The 2015 codes by the International Building Code and the National Fire Protection Association are on the street and available for sale, and they are identical to Connecticut's code today. There are no changes. The 2018 codes are in the development phase, and we really don't know what's going to be submitted to them because those closing dates for proposals to be submitted by the public and the fire marshals and fire chiefs and everyone else is far out in the future. It's July or September. So we really don't know what proposals are being submitted. A lot of discussion, but again, everybody's kind of waiting for that final report to see exactly what happened so that we don't jump to conclusions and start to apply some subjectivity to this when we really should be objective. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
I'm Mr. Nickel. You still did not address the question I asked, and that's how do you get the fire truck down that aisle? You drew a nice picture going to the left, but it's not going down the aisle where the fire is. Don't forget, it's 28 feet wide, and you got a pickup truck and an SUV parked back to back.
Yes,
and you're going to blow your sirens.
Yes,
at 3 o'clock in the morning.
And by your comment, back to back, meaning that as I drive down the lane, the access way towards the side of the building, there's parking on the left and there's parking on the right.
Correct.
From the back of that vehicle to the back of this vehicle, it's 28 feet wide. That's our fire department lane.
You have two vehicles in there occupying 28 feet.
No, you misunderstand.
No, I'm not.
Well, my point is that the overall, from the front of the car to the front of the car,
it's 28 feet.
No. You've got the car from the back bumper to the back bumper is 28 feet.
It's not what it says on this plan.
I'm sure, Mr. What's that? Well, he's talking lengthwise. There is adequate width in here for the fire truck, and that's one of the things that Chief Healy evaluated. His concern was, can we get the fire truck in there under all conditions and around, and do we comply with the access road requirements of the Connecticut Fire Prevention Code? And it was his determination that we were compliant.
So I guess you're saying the plan here with the 28 feet is wrong?
The access width is 28 feet. He's looking at the whole width of the parking lot.
Yeah, I'm saying
right.
Here.
And it's far in excess of 28 feet.
That's 28
right,
feet.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, as I said, from the back of the bumper to the back of the bumper, that where you would drive through is 28 feet. You have to take into account the 12-foot for the car and the 12-foot for the car. So the width of the overall parking lot, the paved area, is far wider.
It doesn't say that on the plan.
I'm sure we can take a look at that with Mr. Streckers. Yeah, I'm being told it does, and I don't have the large-scale drawings with me. But that is certainly a requirement that we have complied with.
Any additional questions from the board? Seeing none, Attorney Lynch, any more rebuttal?
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Hennessy, a Hennessy Architects. I'm the architect for the project. I just have 2 quick points I'd like to make. I've heard a number of times where it keeps being brought up over and over again, this wood truss construction. We don't plan to use any wood trusses in this building. We normally don't build that way. The floor systems are constructed using solid joists. They do not have open webs. As well as the roof. The roof on this building, and that brings me to my second point, and I have a handout here for you, which I'll give to you. So I just wanted to make the point, what this small plan shows you is a view of the roof plan of this building. And you'll see most of the area is white. That indicates where the flat roof area is. And we do have some small sloped roof areas which are indicated by that stripe pattern, which is the standing seam roof. So in all, the roof is roughly about 85% flat. So the reason I'm bringing this up, there was a lot of talk about concealed spaces and how it communicates fire and things of that nature. We don't have that here. This is a flat roof system that has no concealed spaces in it, except for these small attic spaces which are framed on top of the roof system. So we frame a flat roof system and then we frame these small gables on top as an architectural feature. And those are my 2 points. If you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other rebuttal? Okay. The opposition has a chance to rebut the rebuttal. There's a few rules. 1, you have to be under 3 minutes. 2, you have to address something that was brought up on rebuttal. And the third is you had to have spoken previously at today's meeting. So if anyone would like to rebut the rebuttal, please come to the podium, state your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Dottie Bateman again from Caswell Cove. I may be mistaken, but I realize that the studies about the New Jersey fire have not been, they're not finished yet. I understand that. But if I remember correctly, while watching it on TV, the biggest problem was not getting one fire truck in. They couldn't get the number of fire trucks that showed up. They couldn't get enough in to fight the fire. That we saw for ourselves on TV. You didn't need a study for that. Thank you.
I just have one question. Like the gentleman said about where you park your cars and the driveway and everything. Wonder if they have snow like we've got right now. Where's the snow going to go? It's going to take part of that 28 feet, guaranteed. I mean, if you want to see, come down to my house where they plow me in, and I'll show you.
Excuse me, miss, could you just please state your name for the record? We have this. I'm sorry? Thank you. Anyone else? Sir, you haven't.
I've been spoken before in your last meeting.
Okay.
Can I spoke again? Am
Sure.
I allowed to? Yeah. My name is Akil Tanrıgöden, and I have been here, so if you remember me. Dear committee, the case is so simple. On one side, all these people are coming here voluntarily and trying to prove how disturbing it is if this project becomes alive. On the other hand, the people are just in care of filling their pockets, and each time they are finding someone. As an engineer, he is coming here and giving lots of figures. I'm an engineer and I have been working more than 30 years. Theoretically, you can prove everything, but when you take the theory into the practice, it doesn't work. The gentleman, he is very, very good. He really studied his subject. I believe his company did the right thing, the construction company did the right thing to finding him. In theory, okay, it's working. The next time when the fire occurs, I will ask him and come and sit next to the driver and drive where he has to go and how he has to park, how he has to turn. Please, please, ladies and gentlemen, consider all these. These people are voluntarily. These are just trying to make money. Thank you.
Tony Marola. I totally agree with this gentleman here. In theory, it sounds great, but the fire in Edgewater, the fire in Quincy, the fire in Wilmington with the same type of construction, those had all the standard building codes, but they all managed to burn to the ground. Thank you.
Seeing no one else, the applicant gets a last chance at rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Brantz is handing out two handouts to you. One is a follow-up letter from Bruce Hilson, who was our traffic expert, basically addressing Attorney Whitney's concerns that were raised at the public hearing last time. His letter is dated February 6th and basically reiterates his conclusions as to the necessity for setting up the right-hand turn only exit from the property as it addresses sightline issues for the traffic traveling west on Bick Drive coming up the hill. So again, that had been an issue at the last hearing, and for the record, we are submitting his follow-up letter to that. And then lastly, Mr. Friedman can't be here tonight. He was in Florida on business and got held up, so he did put together a letter dated February 17th. I am submitting it for the record, and Mr. Chairman, basically paraphrasing his letter, he's thanking the board for their attention to this application. We've now gone to a third night of a public hearing. You've put in a lot of time, patience, listening both to our evidence and our testimony, our experts, as well as concerns raised by the neighbors. So we do appreciate that. But we iterate the fact that this is a project that is basically coincides with the other Garden Homes application that was approved in 2012 on Cascade Boulevard. We want to build and intend to build a high-quality project to provide affordable housing for young people in the Milford community. Again, we stand by the comments that we made at the outset that there is a purpose to Section 830G of our statutes. It's designed to promote affordable housing, and we like to think, again, in a positive vein, that this application does address the spirit and the intent of the statute. There were, of course, concerns that were raised over the last 3 nights. We talked about the water pressure and the water supply. We addressed those with letters from the Water Authority at our last hearing. There was the issue that was raised that basically brought up questions of the adequacy of the supply and pressure. So I think we've addressed those with the water pumps that we're going to be supplying. Joe addressed it in his comments to you tonight as well. We did recognize the concerns that Mr. Contafio and Attorney Whitney had raised, and we did revise the plans to address that. But we also want to raise the question that, you know, these issues came up relative to this application tonight, but there are other projects in the area, such as Caswell Cove, that were approved in the 90s, and water pressure certainly wasn't raised as an issue in the approval of that project. From the letters that were submitted from Attorney Whitney, clearly these were issues that Mr. Contafio had raised since the 80s, and we raised the question, why are they being raised now? And we like to say that it's because of the fact that we're before you with an affordable housing project, and that's part of what people are trying to raise as health and safety issues. We all know that in opposition to an 830G application, you do have to raise public health and safety issues, and throughout our presentation to you, we've countered that argument by saying that a lot of the comments raised by neighbors, raised by Mr. Kochi and Mr. Walker, are all issues relative to the building code, and that is not part of your purview. I assume that you all know that there's another step that happens after an application is presented to the Planning and Zoning Board. Plans have to then go on to the building department. They have to be reviewed. They have to be assured and certified by Mr. Hennessy, the architect, that the plans do meet the building code and the fire code, and these plans certainly do. There was also the issue relative to the wood frame construction that we've addressed tonight. And also, lastly, there was the traffic issues that were raised. We talked right at the outset about the infrastructure that was put into place back in the 60s to adequately handle the traffic that this project will generate. We came in before you with a traffic expert, Mr. Hilson, who has uncontroverted expert analysis of the traffic flow, and his conclusions have not been contested by any other expert, and his conclusions are that the traffic that's generated by this project will not have an adverse effect on the area. Again, we talked in our initial presentation that Bick Drive was expanded to 50 feet back in the 60s to handle the Bick plant, where there was roughly 1,500 people working during 3 shifts, and we feel that that infrastructure that was put into place back in the 60s adequately addresses dissipation of the traffic from this project. So in conclusion, you know, every time I come before this board with an application, of course, I have to sit with David beforehand and go over the plans along with the engineer and sometimes the architect. And David's comment is always, let's make these plans bulletproof. Let's put into the plans all of the things, even though this is an 830G application and we're not bound by the zoning regulations, let's show on the site plan, let's show on these plans a good project, something that meets the standards, the traffic and the parking meets the standards of the zoning regulations. They've been signed off by the police commission. The plans have been signed off by the fire marshal. Mr. Healy's most recent email from February of 2014 was made part of the record. Each and every one of the city departments have reviewed these plans, and it's very rare to come before you with an application like this, especially an 830G application, where each and every one of the departments have reviewed these plans and have signed off on them with approvals. So we'd ask that you follow not just the comments that our own experts have presented to you tonight, but also your fire marshal and your police commission, and the fact that the you want to hand that out to David? Sure thing. I just mentioned an email from Fire Marshal Healy. I believe that's part of the record, but Attorney Brantz is going to pass it on to David. And Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that that be made part of the record as well. but it's his final email upon reviewing the plans last February where he said that these plans meet the fire code standards and are approved by his department. They were then passed on to the Fire Commission, and at its meeting, the Fire Commission approved the plans as well. So we'd ask that you act favorably on this application. Again, we've spent 3 nights giving you information. There's a lot to digest. There's numerous handouts, so I'd ask that you go through all the information and do the right thing and approve this. Thank you.
Any questions from the board before we close the record? Mr. Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Tochi, could you tell me how many people work in the old Vic building now?
The building is about 95% leased, and we have approximately 400 employees who come and park at the site every day.
Is it just during a day shift, or is there more than one shift in there, do you know?
Principally day shift. There are, let's see, there's one tenant that does have a night shift, and that's 3PL Worldwide, but the rest are day shifts.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sutton.
Yes, I have a question for Attorney Lynch. In the letter that you provided us from Mr. Friedman, he copies the office of the U.S. Attorney, of the Civil Division of the U.S. Attorney's Office. What is their interest at this point?
Prior to our initial public hearing, I got comment, actually an email and correspondence from Attorney Vanessa Avery from the Office of the United States Attorney in New Haven. And to be quite blunt, last year Mr. Friedman had filed a complaint with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development after the moratorium had been passed, making a complaint that in his mind Milford was not acting in good faith in terms of allowing him to make a presentation to you with this application. So a complaint was filed with HUD, and Attorney Avery is the attorney with the United States Attorney's Office. I know she was here at one prior public hearing, basically monitoring what was going on before the board, but in answer to your question, that's who she is.
If I may follow up, Mr. Chairman. Sure. And what is the status of that complaint that Mr. Friedman made?
It's under investigation.
Is there a potential timetable for its resolution?
I have no idea.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Ms. Servine?
Just as a matter of curiosity and also for the record, Mr. Kochi mentioned that your Fairfield application was denied by that P&Z board. Is that in appeal right now?
It is on appeal, correct, yes.
And I wondered if there was anything about, again out of curiosity, about that application that was helpful in presenting this application to us regarding the one driveway.
Well, I think Attorney Brantz can handle that because I think he's involved with the appeal, but I know that there was a comment about a report from the fire department. It's my understanding that the fire marshal in Fairfield signed off on the plans, but at the public hearing, oddly enough, the fire chief came and spoke in opposition to the application.
For the record, Mark Brantz, I was there for all the hearings in Fairfield, and we're handling that appeal, and that's correct. The fire marshal's office signed off on the plans as being in compliance with the fire code. The fire chief expressed concern, but also noted that the fire chief agreed it was in compliance with code. He just had concerns, so it was denied. And we'll see how that goes on appeal, but I have a pretty good idea. I mean, basically, Fairfield is trying to prove that the Connecticut Fire Protection Code doesn't protect against fire. That's going to be a tough sell, I think.
Mr. Mead?
Through you to Mr. Lynch.
Yes.
Could you tell me, the big concern about the gas pipeline going through this property and where it comes into Milford, do you know of any other areas where it's close to residential homes, and if there is, how close?
If you see the handout that we had given to you, I think at the last public hearing, it shows an overview of how it passes through Milford, specifically as it relates to Mr. Cantafio's property, which it's as close to his building as it would be to ours, and approximately. And also, as Mr. Friedman had put into his letter, the pipeline runs along the boundary line of our property, almost in an L, along the westerly boundary line and the southerly boundary line. So it leaves the entire rest of the parcel to be developed. And again, attached, and I think Gene, actually I should have mentioned this before, Gene. One of the concerns that you had raised at the last hearing was some input from Iroquois. What we attached to Richard's letter there, and I invite you to go through it, is a complete written policy from Iroquois as to how you can develop your property, the standards that you have to follow in terms of building. You can't build any structures over the easement area itself, but it goes into great detail, and I invite you to read through that.
Another question, again, just for the record, was there any discussion or thought on your part about making a separate access road for a fire truck?
Because of the topography, it really was impossible. The way it's up on top of that hill and then the slope coming down to, to Big Drive, it's really impossible. Yeah. And also, that was one of our concerns in terms of providing the sidewalk. But then once we looked at it again and we spoke to Gary Wassmer, I think Steve Trinkus, our engineer, was concerned about putting it actually onto our property, but Gary signed off on it being within the city's right-of-way along Naugatuck. So again, at the last hearing, we submitted conditions of approval to you that we were proposing, the booster pumps and the sidewalks on both Bick and Naugatuck.
Going here.
That's all right.
Again, for the record, I was looking at Doug Hero's statements about the water issues. From
yes,
our
he
last
had actual correspondence with the water company, and I think we gave that to you.
Yes, well, I'm just looking at the record here that we have from the minutes, and he says something that sounds a little ambiguous to me. He says, at this time, storage tanks are not required.
We don't plan on having the storage tanks. I think we had come up with that at the first public hearing as an alternative, but then upon speaking to the Water Authority after the first public hearing, but before the second public hearing, it was determined, A, that the volume of water in the street is adequate, and B, that the booster pump system would address what Mr. Cantafio's issues were. Or at least we thought that it would address your issues.
I recalled what Attorney Whitney said from Northeast Electronics, that she, I believe, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, that they have 3 pumps and then they have the storage tank, and they have, according to her, serious problems with their water pressure. So
I can't address
I know.
what's going on in Mr. Cantafio's building.
My question would be, how did you determine the 2 pumps? You've probably stated that somewhere else, but could you tell me again?
Doug, did you? Doug's here, so he can.
Again, Doug Hero from Garden Homes. 2 pumps are required, one for the domestic and one for the fire pump as we see it right now. I can address the 4 pumps. My assumption, and I only can assume what that system is operating on, it could be a backup pump that is for the additional pump. It could be 2 small pumps, which is also some criteria of design, as opposed to 1 large pump. These systems typically only require 1 pump. Our system only requires 1 pump for the fire and possibly the domestic, but that's based on the building design once we get into it. At the worst case scenario, there'd be 2 pumps, 1 for domestic, 1 for fire. I can't address the 4 pumps, not sure of what they're trying to accomplish with 4 pumps, but on pretty much all fire protection systems, 1 pump is required, and in our case, that's all that's required. The 4 pumps I'm not sure how that design was enacted on that job.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Mr. Mead?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Lynch, to your expert on the water, would your applicant, or if there's a way to put a water pump station in for the whole area to help alleviate the problem for other people as part of the application, or it's not possible?
Yeah, if the water company wants to do that, they can.
Yeah.
That's their requirement to supply.
See, there's an issue of supply and pressure, and the water company has verified there's adequate supply. And I think Tom Nickel had even raised a really good question, because it was based on common sense. If you have a pump and you're sucking water out of the line, does it create a void? And the answer to that is no. There's adequate supply. If you're pumping water out, the water's going to come right behind it. So in other words, to service our building to increase the water pressure, we need to have the pumps on site. In terms of other properties on the area, maybe they need to install pumps. We can't address that.
Say one big pump station would not help the other buildings.
Have you ever seen that?
You do find, I'm sorry, Joe Versteeg, you do find in areas of, in flatlands like out in the Midwest, where we continually develop, the pipes that supply the water have plenty of volume, but they don't have pressure. And what you will see oftentimes, especially if you go throughout New Jersey, you will see these big mushroom tanks up in the air, and they contain water. And what they do is the weight of that water injects into the pipeline and increases the pressure and helps push the water along through the pipe to get it farther down the line. But that's a water company decision on whether they have to do that to meet the demands of their customers. I mean, certainly if they're not providing water at the proper pressure, then they've got some public utility issues because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any last call, any more questions from the board? Seeing none, we will close the record.
Thank you.
Does anyone have an opinion one way or the other whether or not we should vote tonight or? All right, it seems like there's a consensus that we will vote at the next meeting. Thank you very much. If you're going to leave, if you could please leave quietly because we have more to do on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is liaison reports. Any reports? Snowed out. The next item on the agenda is regulation subcommittee. I believe you all have a handout from Mr. Grant. He would like you to take a look at it, and then we will discuss and possibly vote on moving them along at the next meeting. The next item on the agenda, the approval of minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Anyone against? The motion passes. The next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I have no report. Next item on the agenda is the staff report. Any report?
Not this evening.
Motion to adjourn. Anyone like to make a motion? Mr. Veen, we have a second. Meeting's adjourned.
I said you would know.